Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
I'm Rob.
And we've got a lovely, lovely show for you today about one of my favorite human beings who has ever walked this earth. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but we are talking about not just the man, but what he created. We're talking about Jim Henson and the Muppets. And everything that's just come out of this wonderful creation. I love the Muppets dearly. I read a really good book about Jim Henson a few years ago. I no longer have the book. There's also a lot of really great museum exhibits. If you are in, I at least know of two places. If you are in New York City, then you can head on over to Queens and you can go to the Museum of the Moving Image, and they have a really great Jim Henson exhibit. And they also have a similar exhibit over in the Mopop Museum in Seattle, Washington. Both of those exhibits are very similar, but they're very cool. They detail his life and the creation of the Muppets and how they've taken on a life of its own. They really do a great job of telling the story over there. But by the way, I've also tried the cereal. I didn't forget about that. I've tried the Dunkin' Donuts cereals. I've tried both of them now.
Oh.
Yes.
What'd you think?
I really like them.
Yeah.
I still have a little bit left of the I believe it's the caramel macchiato. I think
that's the pink one?
Yeah, I have the pink one.
Okay.
I have a little bit of the orange one left. And you know what? Let me take it out here. My pantry's right over, like just over the laptop. Yeah. The pink one is the mocha latte, made with Dunkin coffee, and the orange one here is the caramel macchiato, made with Dunkin coffee. I hope that people can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, personally, I really enjoy those cereals. They do give me a little spring in my step. We're not sponsored by anything, so this is not a plug, but I do enjoy the cereals very much. So, they give me a little pep in the afternoon. I don't really eat breakfast so much anymore. I tend to do intermittent fasting most days, but a couple of days, but like there's 2 days a week where I do have breakfast, and those breakfasts have consistently been the Dunkin' Donuts cereals. Sometimes I just have it for lunch to break my fast. So it's still a breakfast, but I'm splitting up the term, so it is a break fast rather than a breakfast. I do like them. I think I may like the pink one a little bit more. The mocha latte. I think that's the one that I've really enjoyed a little bit more. But you can't really beat the caramel macchiato too. Sometimes it depends on the day, and you really just want that. But it tastes similar to what what the flavor title is. It does have a profile similar to either a caramel macchiato or a mocha latte in there, and it does like kind of coffee-ize your milk, which is interesting. The marshmallow is actually, I think, where some of the coffee bits are in, because you can see the little bit of flake. So that's kind of unique. I don't know if this is necessarily a children's cereal. I think this is more of like an adult cereal.
No, it's absolutely it's an adult cereal because it has caffeine in it. So you really shouldn't give it to children unless you want them fucking bouncing off the walls.
Well, I mean, they can go back to school now. So if you want to just let the teacher handle it, then, just go ahead and be a bad parent. But I not that I think you should, because the teachers work very, very hard, and honestly, you should treat them with respect because they're responsible for you for the next generation of children, and God help us. But Dunkin' Donuts cereal, what a treat! Speaking of treats, we are Why Does This Exist? We are a podcast that talks about very weird things in pop culture. We've been going for nearly a year now. I can't believe this. We're closing in on 40 episodes that we've done since January. We've been getting by with love and our good looks, but that doesn't pay the bills necessarily. So if you want to give us a little bit of money and help us pay those bills, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon. That's patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. We have a lot of really fun rewards for you. You can just join for as little as $1 and we'll let you into our Discord, and there's a whole bunch of other really neat things, like you could even be on a show. That's one of the incentives also, and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about, and you can be the expert for that one on your armchair wherever you are in digital media device land. We also have a patron thing as part of Podbean. Podbean has its own separate one, so you can also do that you can also find us on Podbean and do it there as well if you want to give us money somewhere else. I don't know why you wouldn't want to just put it all in the same place, but whatever you feel comfortable with, go right ahead. You can also find us on social media, on Twitter at WDTEpod. We don't always go on there because, well, let's face it, Twitter is a cesspool for maniacs. So we try to keep a low profile, and we instead post more regularly on Facebook. That's facebook.com/whydoesthisexistpod. If you want to be a little bit more private with your kudos or negativity, you can do so at whydoesthisexistshow@gmail.com. You can also head over to whydoesthisexistpod.com. We have all of our episodes archived, and we also have some additional articles that are pretty fun. We don't always update new articles all the time, but about once a month or so, we put up a new article. So check it out. There's some fun stuff there for you to get your fix of some weirdness. You can also tell us how we're doing by heading over to YouTube. Just find the channel, Why Does This Exist? And like, subscribe, comment on our stuff. You can dislike it, but the adoring public will never know that so many people hate our videos. Only we will know in private, and we'll die a little bit inside. But
well, that's unless you use the new plugin apparently for Google Chrome that lets you see the dislike button again.
Really? That's so stupid.
Someone already came up with a freaking plugin for it to fix it.
Of course they did. Good job, you, whoever you are. You can also find us wherever you get your regular podcasts. That would be Podbean, like we said, YouTube, like we said, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Pandora, TuneIn, Alexa, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes, and Stitcher. And if you find it in your heart to give us a nice review on any of those platforms, please do it. It helps more people find us. And maybe those people will give us $1. You never know. That's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. Let's get on with the goddamn show. Let's talk about Jim Henson. Let's talk about the Muppets. Let's talk about Kermit, Gonzo, Piggy, Animal, the rest of Electric Mayhem, Scooter, Skeeter, Ralph the Dog. Fozzie Bear, yes, Fozzie Bear. Sweetums. Sam the Eagle.
Swedish Chef.
The Fraggles.
The Fraggles were Muppets?
Yes, the Fraggles.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, the Fraggles were Jim Henson creations. What?
So
Just about everything that
do we consider? Let's discuss this first. Do we consider the Muppets just like the traditional Muppets, like that were featured on the Muppet Show, or do we say that the Muppets are everything that Jim Henson created? So, like, you know, Sesame Street, like Elmo and Bert and Ernie, are they Muppets too? Would they could be considered Muppets?
That's a good point. I mean, I don't know because because the Muppet design.
I think they are considered Muppets. I mean, Kermit the Frog was on Sesame Street.
Yes. I would say all of it.
And by that extension, can we consider Yoda a Muppet? Although I don't know if he was created by Jim Henson. He was obviously he in the original Yoda, not talking CGI Yoda. The original puppet Yoda from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, I think, was operated and, well, obviously voiced by Frank Oz, but I think also operated by Frank Oz.
Frank Oz also voiced Grover and
he voiced a lot of Muppets.
He voiced many Muppets.
Yes.
For whatever reason, Disney will not let him have any input on anything now, and he's been very vocal about that in recent years. And he really hates what Disney's been doing to the Muppets.
Well, I mean, Disney has been making less than stellar Muppets stuff lately. Although it wasn't
the Haunted Mansion thing that they did recently. I didn't see the new.
I haven't seen it,
thing, but I like the Haunted Mansion thing that they did.
I mean, Disney has owned the Muppets for a long time, for like since the 90s.
Yeah,
and they did release some, like the Muppet Christmas Carol came out under Disney ownership.
That's one of my favorites. I actually really
and that's my favorite Muppets movie. It's actually really good, and you would think, okay, it's just a Muppets movie, but it's actually a really good adaptation of A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And they got Michael Caine to play Ebenezer Scrooge, who's probably the biggest actor in there besides, you know, like Frank Oz, who does, you know, Miss Piggy and Fozzie and all that.
Yeah.
You know, so that, you know, it's actually a really good movie, and it's a really good retelling of A Christmas Carol. And if my memory serves correctly, the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come in that was terrifying. And I remember watching it as a kid, and it was like the scariest thing ever.
He was pretty spooky. And then I think when he took the hood off, no, I'm sorry. Sweetums was the what was the Ghost of Christmas Present? No, you're right. It was pretty spooky.
Yeah,
what they had, it was like, I think it just had eyes, like just like glowing red eyes.
Yeah,
it was pretty damn scary.
Let's see if I could find.
Yeah, but Muppets, Muppets are a it's kind of like just like a style of puppet to just create now, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's been like rip-offs of the Muppets, you know.
Oh yeah. Actually, the flocking technique that you'll see on clothing now, that was actually created by Jim Henson. So, like, the flocking technique is what gives Muppets that distinct fuzzy appearance. Mm-hmm. I forgot what it was. I think they dampen something and then blow. I think they dampen like felt and they blow dry it or something like that. There's some weird thing that they do with flock to flock something. And actually, you'll see that on some of the Muppet Funko Pops, like the variant editions, will be flocked. That's almost like an homage to Jim Henson, but he created that technique, actually, and it's like just to really give them distinction. And it also helps the colors pop. But Jim Henson was making the Muppets, he was really making like puppeteering in his own brand of entertainment when he was in high school, I think.
Yeah, well, he created the Muppets in 1955.
Yeah.
So he was like a teenager when he created the Muppets, because I think he was born in 36, I want to say. Let's see. Yeah, 1936. So he was like 19 when he created the Muppets.
Yeah, and he would shop them around to do local commercials for the TV stations in his town. Mm-hmm. He already had his own little business with them for a while. But,
yes.
His
And obviously his most iconic Muppet and probably the symbol of the Muppets. When you say the Muppets, everyone thinks of Kermit the Frog. Was one of his first.
Yeah,
That he created.
Kermit is basically he's the Mickey Mouse of the Muppets.
Yes.
He's the Bugs Bunny of the Muppets. Like they're like this is he's possibly the most iconic one. My favorite personally is Gonzo.
I like Gonzo too. Gonzo's my favorite as well.
Just because he's like a weirdo and I'm a weirdo,
Yeah.
so I think that's why it works.
Yeah, Gonzo, and he's pretty funny. Gonzo, I think his sense of humor is pretty good. The jokes centered around Gonzo.
Yeah.
I also like Fozzie. Fozzie's pretty funny.
Fozzie's interesting. He's because Fozzie doesn't care. Fozzie's still gonna do whatever. Fozzie's gonna Foz, and it's like even though he's not necessarily funny, he doesn't care, and he's gonna he has like a great never give up attitude that really shines through. And I like the Swedish Chef a lot too. I mean, I like all of them, but I like the Chef a lot too, just because he's like just freaking goofy as hell.
Yes.
Really, on like the more recent Muppets variety show thing that Disney was doing, I didn't really watch that many episodes of it, but the one consistent thing that I enjoyed were the Swedish Chef segments where he was cooking alongside celebrity chefs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
did they have Gordon Ramsay?
I don't know. They had Roy Choi. They had Machete. They had Danny Trejo for the taco one.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And it's like the other person, the celebrity chef, is actually doing the cooking, and then you have the Swedish chef who's just throwing everything in there and just trying to do it, and he has this giant mess, and the other person just and then they put everything in the oven at the same time, and of course somehow he has a perfect whatever the thing is at the end, and the guy's like, wait, what? But it's the Muppets. Their humor is just complete chaos.
Yeah. And they've really become kind of a cultural icon. I mean, we talk about a lot of cultural icons on the show. And I think the Muppets are really, one of those, everybody knows who the Muppets are. I would say they have the same brand recognition as, Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny even. And it's funny because it's when Jim Henson created the Muppets, he didn't intend them necessarily to be for kids. It was more of he geared them more towards adults. And the original Muppet Show was more of an adult variety show.
Right.
I mean, I guess it's more of it could be for the whole family, older children, but it wasn't a young kids show like Sesame Street.
No, it more or less had something for everyone. But a lot of the humor was more inclined for adults, all of the guests, all the celebrity guests, to reel in the adults.
Yes. Yeah, and
a 7-year-old is going to care about. Well, I don't think a 7-year-old would really care if Johnny Cash or Buddy Rich were on the Muppet Show, but I personally,
they did have celebrities. They did have celebrities that kids would have recognized too at the time.
They did.
They did Pigs in Space, and they had Mark Hamill there.
Right, and they had Steve Martin.
I don't know if he was just Mark Hamill or if he was actually supposed to play Luke Skywalker.
I don't know. I mean, they had I don't
remember.
They had a good variety of people.
Yes.
Just on the show. I mean, you can that is now on Disney Plus, but of course, because a lot of people are oversensitive to things. There's certain episodes where they put a disclaimer in front, where it's oh, this might be something sensitive in here. I think in the Johnny Cash one, there was a Confederate flag somewhere.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was just oh, you got to understand that these were the times. It doesn't mean this. All right,
Well, apparently Disney does that for all their older movies and stuff that have I think was it Dumbo, the crows? They have to put a disclaimer in front of Dumbo, the elephant now.
Yeah,
stuff.
Honestly, I never picked up on that until I never picked up on that until everyone got offended about it, and I was wait, that's what this was? I had no friggin' idea.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing that
I
kids
feel like
don't friggin' understand it. So
I feel like most people didn't.
yeah,
Most people don't understand things, and then like a few people get like oversensitive about something, and then and then all of a sudden it becomes a big problem.
I mean, like I understand why Disney puts those disclaimers.
No. I'm not blaming Disney. This is probably like a big legal issue now, where like they just where like legal just says, "All right, just do it. Just put it over anything you think would be problematic. Just do it."
I wouldn't even say it's a legal issue. I would say, Disney being like the biggest media company or one of the biggest media companies in the world, they don't want to lose any revenue. Yeah. And so they're like, well, we're just not going to like offend anybody ever and do this because we need to like make sure everybody still watches us and gives us money.
I mean, that's a good fail-safe way to do it. Where like, even if you don't think anyone would be offended, just like slap it over there and just in case, and then nobody can say anything.
Yeah.
Because then there's just like, oh, well, we put the warning there, so like...
And then like, for people on the other side, they'd be like, well, we're not taking it off. We're just putting a warning on it. You can still watch it, It's like... Yeah, it's... trying to make everybody happy.
I mean, you're never going to, but like, that's at least the safest way to like... get everybody, like, kind of like... You get everybody mad in the middle, and I guess that's the best that you can hope for. But what are you gonna do? Anyway, so we said, at around 18, like Jim Henson was like already he was just so far ahead of his time. But like
yes,
when he was like 18, he's already creating puppets, and I mean it was like he was like very much like enamored in the late 40s when he got the family got the first television set, and he like called it the biggest event of his adolescence. And he saw like and there was like Edgar Bergen, who was a famous radio ventriloquist back in the early days, and they were all, and like the TV puppets were like Bill Tillstrom on Kukla, Fran and Ollie, and Bill and Cora Baird, and he was very influenced by just puppets and ventriloquism, and just fascinated with TV. And he like, just as a child, to like, there was just something always there, and like a spark was lit, and he was just like, oh man, I love puppets and I love TV, and I'm gonna find out how to do both of those things. And he did. When he was like 18, while he was in college, when he was in high school, he was like making puppets for like local TV stations.
Yeah.
Like just for like a Saturday morning show called the Junior Morning Show. And he of course, took like, he of course like got an arts degree. And he took like a puppetry class that showed him like textiles and things, and that's kind of where that came together. He ended up graduating with a degree in home ec. And he creates Salmon Friends when he was a freshman, and that was his like first thing. Salmon Friends. If you go to any of those exhibits that I just talked about, whether you're at the MoMA or at Mopop, or I mean, I'm sure if you look it up, there's plenty of other. I'm sure there's many other exhibits in the country that are just like it, because they made tons of puppets of the same puppet. So like, I'm sure there's like enough to go around in at least 10 places. But they have some of the old, at least in the Museum of the Moving Image, they have some of the original Salmon Friends puppets on display. And they had like a Yorick one, which was just like obviously named after Yorick and Shakespeare. And Salmon Friends was just this wild little like chaotic 5-minute thing, and some of the characters were like forerunners for the Muppets. Like they had like a little like frog one that was like a prototype, which ended up becoming Kermit later on. That was kind of the one from Salmon Friends that stuck. Some of the Salmon Friends characters were there in the earlier days of the Muppets, and then when like other Muppets, like other more unique Muppets started being created, those kind of like faded into the background. But yeah, Salmon Friends, it was like a lot of the Sam and Friends stuff was just used for like cigarette commercials and things like that. Also, like he kind of used his characters not just on the 5 minute show, but he also was using some of them for like local TV commercials and things like that too. And like already he was like just branding everything that he could in his local little town, and he was almost like a little like sort of like a junior celebrity in that town.
Mm-hmm.
But he would just he was always experimenting.
Yes.
Like it wasn't just let's do a puppet show for kids and we're just singing and dancing and there's a puppet. He was always trying to push the envelope where he could make everyone laugh. Like he was the beauty and the humor and the chaos. So like everything would explode. There was always something had to explode at the end of every single thing, no matter what it was, whether it made sense or not. Something exploded.
But you got to give credit to him too. The fact that he's a guy who took puppets, which you think look back at puppets. Puppets have always kind of been viewed as like stupid or like it's like childish. It's something you would like hire for a children's birthday party. And he made puppets cool, and he made puppets like funny and able to appeal to not just children. Right. So like that alone is like just shows like the innovation that he did, because before that, puppets were kids' things. You hired a puppeteer for your kid's birthday party, and like you would watch puppets on like Saturday morning cartoons and shit like that. Like it wasn't like something that was considered a viable form of entertainment for adults,
Right, and definitely not like a multi-billion-dollar, $1 million industry.
Right.
Like at the time, it was like it wasn't really like. It just was considered like one of the lower forms of entertainment. And he goes and he was like, oh, well, like down the road, he's like, oh, we can put puppets on late night, or like we could give puppets their own variety show. And people were like, no, you can't. And he went and did it. And the Muppet Show was a huge hit.
Yes.
Like we're getting ahead of ourselves for a little bit, but the rest of the time he was just working on like commercials and talk shows and just bringing like his Sam and Friends and puppets and his like early Muppets just on to like things here and there. Like in Sam and Friends, he wound like it got like some national exposure in some areas. Like he ended up showing up on the Steve Allen Show, the Jack Barr program, and the Ed Sullivan Show, where Sullivan actually called him Jim Newsom and his puppet on September 11, 1966, actually. But all the broadcasts kind of made him bigger, and he was able to meet like one of the big commercials that he would do was for the Wilkins Coffee Company, and you can find a bunch of those all over YouTube, and they have some of them in the they have them on like a loop in the museums also. But that was like one of his bigger companies. That was like one of the main commercial stays that he would do, and what he had said was like, till then, advertising agencies believed that the hard sell was the only way to get their message over on television, which that was, if you look at a commercial from the 1950s, it's somebody saying, buy, 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 or, hi, I have a pitcher of water. You should buy this. And then it's just like, this is the best water because it's the only water in town. It's the best water. Water. Buy water. And that was essentially every commercial in the 50s. And then there would always just be some moment like, oh, this water is so waterful. And it's just, there you go. And then a commercial. And where they were just trying to do the hard sell. And then Jim Henson was like, we took a different approach. We tried to sell things by making people laugh. Like the coffee would explode. Or just wacky things would happen to one of the ill-fated characters. Something bad would happen to it because they didn't have the coffee or something of that nature. And it was always really funny, very slapstick, explosive gags that you would see in a Looney Tunes cartoon or something.
Yeah. And I really, the Muppets and Jim Henson it was really like, it was like the masters of comedic timing, and like,
that's the most important thing.
Whenever something
always been
happens, having
great.
the Muppets like look at the screen like and break the fourth wall, like with that like sardonic look that they have, and it just works every time. And they did it all, throughout everything. Like the Muppet Show, they did it, in Sesame Street a lot, especially like with the Bert and Ernie gags when like Ernie would do something crazy and Bert would kind of just like look at the screen because he was the straight man basically. And the really interesting thing too is that Jim Henson was using a really old style of comedy and stuff because it was really like influenced by vaudeville,
right?
And it was like this is like a style of comedy that was like had been around since the early 1900s, and it worked even probably even the 1800s really, and it worked and it was funny. And so it was like it brought something fresh to something that was really old, like if you had like a bunch of normal ass people doing vaudeville, like yeah, it could be funny, but it wouldn't be like new or exciting or innovative. But like using the Muppets to do it really like kind of changed that dynamic and made it kind of like, it was almost like it had to be vaudeville, to kind of like cement the Muppets as like this, like these masters of comedy, because they're using this old style of comedy. I don't, it kind of had to like vaudeville just worked with the Muppets. Like it was what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. I don't even know if it was just the essence of Jim that went into the Muppets that made the humor work or made them work with the humor, but I don't know. There was a part of his soul that went into everything and that's what made it work. Like I'm wondering if another person would have done it. Like, let's say Jerry Lewis makes the Muppets. Would the Muppet like same style of humor and everything? Would it work if somebody else did it?
That's hard to say because
there's so much of Jim's personality infused into this.
Yeah,
you gotta understand, like when someone's making art like this, let's call it what it is. It's art. Especially when it's humorous, there's a part of their soul that's going into this. And when you're trying to make something funny, like you're not just writing it because I think other people will find it funny. The idea, you're bringing this idea out of your mind because it made you laugh. So you're thinking, so like your belief is, well, if I find it, like even if you're not saying it out loud, you're like, well, I find this funny, so I think someone else might. Then you have to pull it out of you.
Yes.
And
yeah, you have to put a part of yourself into it.
Yeah, you have to do it in either a physical form or a verbal form if you're doing stand-up comedy, which is still physical.
Yes.
But that's basically what you're doing, and this is the type of humor that he enjoyed.
Yes.
Clearly, because he couldn't have done this if he wasn't having fun doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, when you do any kind of art, like you said, you're really, I think art is the best way to see into someone's thoughts and their soul and their spirit, because that's what you put on, the page or on the screen or in your music. Like, so like when you look at the Muppets, you're looking at what like Jim Henson's like psyche was and what his soul was. Like you're looking at as bare and as stripped down as you possibly can, besides actually being able to like look into his thoughts, Yeah. And that's really any good artist, I think, does that. You're really pouring yourself out onto the page or into your music or onto the screen or whatever you do, as your artwork. So, the soul of Jim Henson is infused into the Muppets. And, I would say even after he passed away, it continued, maybe not so much as much now, but definitely like right after he had passed away, because you still had a lot of great Muppets content that came out after he passed away. Right. Because he passed away in was it 1990, I believe?
I think
And
90 or 90.
there was a number of great things that came out after. I did actually look up. So Yoda was a Muppet. Jim Henson did create Yoda. So Yoda was a Muppet. Also, a lot of people, you don't think of this, but
the Dark Crystal. Yeah.
Yes. I think the 80s, late 70s into the 80s was really when his, work exploded into the mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
It was mainstream in the 70s because you had the Muppet Show and stuff like that. And,
right.
Miss Piggy and all these.
In 63, I think they had, in 63, they finally put it down and really started really getting the Muppets that we would have. That's when he created, that's when he met Frank Oz. He also hired Jerry Jewell. His wife, Jane Henson, was also performing with him.
Yes.
For a long time, but then Jane had stopped to to raise their children.
Yes.
And Henson got Jerry Jewell and he got Frank Oz. And that was where a lot of the characters were coming up, and also the Jerry Jewell and Frank Oz were also part in the humor of the Muppets as well. So it's these three guys are just sitting there brainstorming, and they're bouncing ideas off of each other and basically just trying to make each other laugh, and then saying, "Oh man, let's make the puppets do this."
Yeah,
that's where all of the mainstay characters came out, like Bert and Ernie, the Kermit as we know him now, Piggy, Fozzie, Gonzo. All of those characters came out in that era. And
then of course the Sesame Street characters too that everybody recognizes, as Cookie Monster and Oscar the Grouch and Big Bird and Elmo and Grover, all these characters that are so recognizable and so iconic, were a product of that era too.
Right, and Sesame Street's out about in 69, so that's where they're starting to get to that I wouldn't say they're at the peak, but they're I want to say they're more than halfway up that mountain at that point.
They're at their season 4 of Seinfeld.
Yeah.
You think about season 4 of Seinfeld is where it really took off and became a cultural icon. That's around the time of Sesame Street, and in into the 70s with the Muppet Show. That's when they were at their that's prime time. For the Muppets and what they created. And then, of course, like I said, you go into the 80s and that's when they really blew up and became so mainstream. And he started doing things in other movies. Like we said, we created Yoda. Then the Dark Crystal. And the Dark Crystal was such a different thing. I mean, it was so different than anything that they had done before. And it was you look at the Dark Crystal and it was it was crazy how different it was and how creepy and really out of this world they made it with all the characters.
I've actually never seen the Dark Crystal, but
I watched it fairly recently, a year ago maybe, for the first time.
I want to watch the Netflix show because that's supposed to be good too.
Yes, and it's puppets as well. It's not
they actually have some. They have some of the Dark Crystal puppets at the Museum of the Moving Image right now too. Actually,
yeah. It's really the effects were crazy, and you think about the amount of work that went into creating these puppets and operating them. It must have been insane. It's not
crazy,
something you could ever capture with computer generated. You'll never get that kind of.
You have to have at least 2 people inside those costumes. Sometimes if it's a Sweetums, you have a full body suit and there's just a whole person in there.
Mm-hmm.
But usually there's 2 people and there's one person who works the mouth and one of the arms and I guess kind of the body since they're in there, and the other person works the other arm.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really in you're really part of a team, and they even have a special shirt that Muppeteers would go into if it's a 2-person, so that they can really it's basically a 2-headed sweater that they have. where like you have to. We're like, yeah, we're like when you move and you do the other, you could see it. If you've ever seen the play Avenue Q,
I have not, but I know what it is, and I know that it was like a lot of like it was basically Muppets.
Yeah, it's not quite Muppets, but it's basically Muppets. It's basically Sesame Street if it were real. Like Sesame Street keeping it real is Avenue Q. It's an unbelievable friggin' show. I don't know if it's back off Broadway. But oh my god, me and the missus, we saw it. God, like 3 years ago, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
When it was, I think it was its last days off Broadway for a while. I don't know if it's back now, but oh my god, just everything was just so funny. I think Jim would have been very proud of Avenue Q.
Yeah,
it like took it farther than he ever could.
Yeah,
because like they like talk about sex. Like there's a song about the internet being for porn.
Yes, yeah.
There's like
and everybody knows that song. But
everybody
doesn't know what it's from. But it's Avenue Q. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so many things in there where it's like, oh my god! Like every second every second that you're watching this, you're putting your face in your palms and you're laughing hysterically because you're like, this is so wrong, but I love it. That show's tremendous. If you ever get a way to see that, I strongly recommend you see it.
Yeah.
Although they are not technically Muppets, they are obviously very inspired by them. But
there's a lot of Muppet or
there's a lot of
that have been
Muppets,
influenced heavily by the Muppets.
Could we call them off Muppets?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of like puppets were influenced heavily by the Muppets. That look a lot more like the Muppets. I think it kind of really influenced like puppet design after that.
Yes. It was revolutionary in puppet design, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like Jeff Dunham, who's for those who don't know, Jeff Dunham is the comedian who has most of his routine is done with puppets. Like he's a ventriloquist.
He's quite possibly the most famous ventriloquist of this time.
Yes. And his one puppet, Peanut, is very, very, you could tell is very influenced by the Muppets.
Yeah.
Just the way it's constructed. And, I think that a lot of, like puppets after the, have taken that influence, because it was so revolutionary. The Muppets, again, we talked about this already, that it was like a cultural icon, when the Muppets were in their prime, it was, everywhere. The Muppets were on like talk shows and stuff like that. And it was like the Muppets, like you wouldn't it wasn't like Jim Henson was there, he would be there sometimes, but like a lot of the times they would just have like Kermit the Frog was on fucking like Jay Leno, basically,
right.
And it was Kermit the Frog. Like, it was just Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, and he would just sit there and he would do, like, awkward questions with just, like, to try, like, like Jay Leno would just try to just get, like, he would just ask a generic thing. So, like, oh, Kermit, like, what do you do down there? And then, like, what do you do in the swamp? And then, like, and then Kermit would, like, go into, like, this whole spiel, and it would just be like, well, it's not just a swamp, it's a beautiful paradise, and I'm here with my pig, and there's, like, a whole thing. And he'd go off on a tangent, and like Jim would do the rest. Like you'd ask the most basic question you could, and Jim would do the rest, or whoever was the Muppet, whoever was doing the Muppet that day, would just do the rest. And like it was so crazy because it went from not just the Muppet Show and having their own variety show and everything, which that was like that had kind of like, I guess the gears for that had kind of like started turning because Jim had he had done a short thing on Saturday Night Live, like a few, like he had involved the Muppets in like a few Saturday Night Live sketches and things. It didn't quite it wasn't quite received that well, but he at least knew like, oh, I could do this. Oh, this could be on prime time. This could be a thing.
Then
and the Muppet Show happened. and that did wonders and like was like the first like non-human variety show really at like prime time, and then the Muppets go Hollywood, and they come out with the Muppet Movie in 1979. Like you said, everything just exploded, and they could not do any wrong. Like you said, he makes Dark Crystal, he makes The Empire Strikes Back with like Yoda and everything, and then you get the Muppets Take Manhattan, which was huge, like gross 25.5 million domestically, was one of the top 40 of like 1984.
Yeah, The Great Muppet Caper, another huge movie.
Right, which Frank Oz directed, actually. He's actually directed a lot of Muppets things. And
yeah, Frank Oz is like, if, Jim Henson's like the main guy, obviously, but Frank Oz is definitely like, the number two in the world of the Muppets. Like he's voiced some of the most popular characters. He operates the puppets too.
Yeah, Frank Oz is the consigliere of the of the Muppet Mafia.
Yeah, it's interesting because Frank Oz and Jim Henson and George Lucas were all kind of like friends and all kind of like worked with each other on different things. Because Jim Henson directed Labyrinth. With David Bowie.
That one I haven't seen either, but they have.
I've never seen Labyrinth either.
And that the puppets there are also very striking too.
Yes, and George Lucas actually produced it.
I think he pushed the puppet design. I think he pushed the Muppet design as far as he could go with Labyrinth.
Yeah. Well, the Dark Crystal too.
Dark Crystal as well. Like, yes.
Yeah. The things in that, or the puppets in that, were just so creepy and so well done and like realistic looking. It was like scary.
Yeah, the detail is just uncanny in those two bodies of work.
So apparently, I didn't know this. Labyrinth was actually shot in Upper Nyack and Haverstraw in New York, which is like, not far from here. It's like, about a 45-minute to an hour drive.
Yeah, about.
It's interesting.
I mean, it's like a quick subway drive for me, but it's about the same on the train. Which that's also kind of like weird how like a subway ride from like one borough into like, like the next borough really like is still about 45 minutes because you're going through all of like the whole like underbelly of the city, and then like you're driving from like far away land, and it's still like somehow the same amount of time.
Yeah, no matter where you go in the city, it's always 45 minutes.
It's always about 45 minutes.
Yep. And if you're going across a borough, it's 45 minutes. So like if you're going just like from like Manhattan to Williamsburg, depending on what part of Manhattan you're in, it could take like 30 to 45 minutes. But if you're going from like Williamsburg to like Brighton Beach or Williamsburg to Gravesend or something, it's 45 minutes.
No, then it's like an hour and a half.
Nah.
Dude, Williamsburg is on the other side.
Yeah, I know.
It's still 45 minutes.
It's 45 minutes.
It's all 45 minutes. 45 minutes in New York City is the relative number.
Yeah, and you could be going from like Alphabet City to Williamsburg, and it would take 45 minutes, even though it's like, as the crow flies, like fucking 5 minutes.
Yeah, it probably would, because I mean, you got to hop on the L train.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's your only way of getting there is that damn L train.
Yeah, the L that just sits in the station for like a half hour before it actually starts moving.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So
if you want fun, you go to Park Slope, by the way.
Why? What's in Park Slope?
I don't know. I don't go there. I don't have fun.
Oh.
That's what I don't know. That's what the cool kids are telling me.
Back to the Muppets. In the 80s, it was really, like we said, it was starting to really blow up. Actually, in a TV series in the 80s that came out, the Muppet Babies, that was actually when I was a kid, I would watch it it was on, reruns on Nickelodeon or something like that. And that was like actually a really good show. It was really cool because they would like make so many references to pop culture and video games and like Star Wars and that kind of stuff, and it was a really cool show. And because it was all the Muppets and their babies, they were like toddlers, and like they're just like basically left in a room alone by the nanny,
which we never see what she looks like, by the way.
Yes, yeah, you just see her legs. That's it. So I wonder if that like inspired like Cow and Chicken with the mom and dad, how you only ever see their legs.
Probably.
But then they would like have all these like adventures.
Well,
where
also
they were,
on
like,
Tom and
imagining.
well, I don't know, because also on Tom and Jerry, you never see what like you never see what any of the people look like either.
That's true.
They just have.
It's just like a trope of like older cartoons where you wouldn't see the legs, or you would only see the legs. You would never see from the waist up.
Yeah, if you
like
saw
humans.
them at all, because like Charlie Brown, you never even see the teacher.
Yeah. And you never, well, I mean, you hear the teacher, but you can't understand what she's actually saying.
Yeah.
So I mean, the Muppet Baby, it was actually a really good cartoon show, and it was really cool because it had all these pop culture references. And as a kid growing up, it's like, oh, like they reference like Zelda, I think, in one video game.
Yeah,
in one episode where they're doing like a video game episode, and it's like, wow, I play Zelda, when I was like 5 or 6 when it came out, Well, it came out before I was born, but I watched it when I was like 5 or 6, is what I should say.
I mean, there's one episode which I mean, this is the one that I've seen the most. Is like there's one where it's like a complete Star Wars parody, and it encompasses every like sci-fi space.
Yes,
it manages to shoehorn every sci-fi like space thing that's like big at the time. So like it like there's bits of like Star Trek in there, and they like basically, I forget who it is, but like someone shows up in like Star Trek stuff, and they like, I think it's Kermit, and like they all shame him because they're like, why are you, because like everybody else is doing Star Wars, and like he shows up in like the Captain Kirk uniform, and he's like, hey guys, and they're like, Kermit, why are you wearing that? Like, yeah, with the program. And then there's like other points in time, and then like at some other point they're like they're doing like basically a total parody on A New Hope when they're in the when they're on the Death Star, and like they're hitting the buttons to get in an elevator shaft or escape or something like that, and then like they hit the button, and then there's like just like a there's just like stock footage of like I think it's like the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica, and they just look at each other and they go, oops, wrong floor. Just leave.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so funny. They have since brought Muppet Babies back. I haven't watched it.
I've seen like parts of it, if it's been on like in the background or something like that. I think it's on Disney Channel or something now.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. I don't know if it's probably on the Disney Channel too.
I don't think it's that good. We haven't had
cable in years.
It's not as good as the original.
I'm sure.
Apparently Howie Mandel and Dave Coulier were also in it, which I didn't know.
Really?
That's crazy.
The original one or the new one?
The original one.
Oh. Well, I know Howie Mandel like did do like a fair bit of animation in like the early 90s. He did Bobby's World. Like Bobby's World was his creation, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you remember that show?
No.
It was just some little boy with a big imagination, basically, and everything was just totally animated. And I think Howie Mandel created the show, and I think he was the voice of Bobby too. I remember I had he had like a tricycle or something that was like a magic thing. Like he would, like whenever he was on the damn tricycle, he would imagine something, and like that would like you'd get transported into his imagination, basically. But I forget if it was McDonald's or Burger King that did the toys, but like I had a couple of them. For like the Happy Meal stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby's World was interesting. I mean, Howie Mandel in general is very interesting. If you've ever seen his old stand up from like way back. Like A, he had hair. B, like did very odd like prop comedy sometimes, and like it was very off the wall humor.
This is the weird thing about Howie Mandel.
Comedian.
I didn't even know Howie Mandel existed until like whatever talks like I think when he started hosting Deal or No Deal.
Yeah, I think that's when a lot of
and then I'm like
who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like apparently no, he's been a famous like comedian and actor for like 20 years. Like, oh well, I've never even heard of him or seen him before in my life.
Yeah, like, just like very low key guy. I'm sure he did like more producing than he did anything else.
Yeah,
because I mean that's probably where the real money is.
Well, apparently he was in Muppet Babies, so I had heard him before. I had heard his voice because I watched Muppet Babies when I was a kid, but I just didn't know who he was.
I bet you the sheets that he sleeps in are really nice. That was really that was very creepy. But like the man has crazy amounts of money that like I'm sure he has like the most comfy like sheets in the world.
Apparently, he voiced Gizmo and Gremlins too.
Really?
Yes.
I could actually see that, but like really?
Yeah. This is like turning into friggin' like friggin' 6 degrees of Howie Mandel.
Yeah, really. Like, what else has he done?
Yeah.
Did he voice like any Gremlin related thing for like throughout the 80s and 90s?
It just says he voiced Gizmo in Gremlins and Gremlins 2.
Was that how he made his money on like residuals and just like famous that, you know what, that's a pretty sweet deal. That's like,
well, I think he was a comedian even before that, so he must.
Oh no, I know that. Like I've seen stuff for like he was on the Apollo.
Oh wow.
Like yeah, like when he did like Showtime at the Apollo and stuff like that. It was like, all right, well you got to be pretty good like to play the Apollo in like the 80s and like not get like murdered. Because that was the most brutal crowd you could ever get in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, his build, like, it was very weird. Like, to say the least. Like, one of, like, the main things that he would do is he would put, like, a latex glove over his head and he would just, like, blow... He would just, like...
Oh, yeah. Blow it up.
He'd just blow it up and he would just, like... That was, like, it. And he would just look at people funny.
I think they did that like there was like a joke on Family Guy where he like puts the glove on his head and blows it up and then he like falls over and like cracks his head on the friggin' like coffee table or something and just bleeds out and they're like
oh my god, that's terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But,
does he even do stand up anymore?
Well, I think he hosts like America's Got Talent or something now.
That doesn't count. That's not like yeah, he might like.
It's one of the biggest shows on TV, so it's.
Oh no, I mean he does like tons of entertainment, but
I think that's all he does now is like hosts like game shows, basically.
Probably, but I mean, like I'm just wondering, does he does he do stand up at all anymore? Like, when was the last time he did stand up?
Good question.
I wonder if he's still got it.
I'm sure he. I mean, that's like Eddie Murphy. Like like.
Well,
when was the last time Eddie Murphy did stand up? And
yeah, but you know Eddie Murphy's still got it.
Yeah,
everybody.
I'm sure he does, and I really hope he does. I mean, there's been like whispers that he's going to do stand up again, and I really hope he does.
He's been wanting to.
I mean, he needs to do a Netflix special.
Yeah, we mentioned it in the lost episodes on the PJs, which
yes.
For those of you who don't know, which is probably just about all of you, except for like one or two people that we've talked that we've spoken to in private, which is probably like special guest Tom, the infamous Alex, and like maybe one or two other people. Mm-hmm. But we had done an episode on the PJs, the stop motion. Sitcom that was created and voiced by Eddie Murphy and everything. We had done an episode previously, and like I don't know what happened. There were some like technical issues on my end with the audio, and like Rob's voice is fine, but my audio has this like terrible echo throughout the entire thing. I've been like I've been on and off on like whether or not I've ever wanted to release this thing. The problem was it was a really great episodes, but
Yeah.
the audio quality is just nothing that I can do about this. Then we've tried plenty.
Yeah, we've tried. There's not. We've tried to like reduce the echo. It doesn't really work.
And Rob has a degree in audio engineering, by the way, so he
Yes.
knows what to try. It's just for whatever reason.
Tried to clean it up as best as I could, and it is a little bit better than it was. But I think we could. I think we could. I think we should. Personally, I think we should release it, but
I don't know if we should.
With a disclaimer, maybe.
I've been thinking about doing that, but also like on a quality control level, like I'm also just thinking like maybe we should just redo it and just listen to it and try to like bring out the same talking points. The problem is like all of it was organics, like as we try to be with every episode. It's hard to replicate certain things, but maybe we can release it and then maybe we could do a redo episode.
Yeah.
So that way you get the original conversation, then you get the new conversation, and then and then that way it can like maybe you can get the proper justice that it deserves.
Yeah.
Like I guess maybe we could do that. We could do that. We could release the PJs or the original episode, and then we can revisit it and just like do like a redo episode, like however long, like a couple of months later or something like that.
Yeah, maybe when Eddie Murphy releases his comedy special,
then we'll never do it.
And then we'll promote Eddie Murphy's comedy special.
Hey, maybe. Anyway, back to Jim Henson. So the 90s, so like 87 to 90, we were just talking about Muppet Babies. And he also like was trying to push the envelope of getting like darker themes. Like he did a show called The Storyteller, which was focused on like folktale and mythology. And that actually won an Emmy. Then he did the Jim Henson Hour, which was a little more lighthearted, but he also threw in some like risky stuff, some like risque stuff in there as well, which also got him another Emmy. Like he was still getting like Emmys left and right, even though ratings were not great, which a lot of that had to do with like NBC because they were just constantly that like they kept like messing with the time slot. So like every week it was on a different time, so like that kind of killed the ratings for the show. But he also had Fraggle Rock, which is, I mean, it depends on who you ask, but like Fraggle Rock is either like it's either beloved or nobody knows about it. Like it's one of those weird like under the radar things. I've seen people with Fraggle Rock tattoos, and like I mean, first of all, why? But like second, it's just like, okay, like you know what this is. You clearly know what this is. Fraggle Rock was an interesting show, though. There was just like the Fraggles who live like underground, basically, and and there's like just they live in their own little world. They every once in a while they go up to the surface world, and like there's like a dog that tries to go after them, and like there's like these other like weird creatures that are trying to eat them. So they're trying to so like if they run into a human, the humans freak out, and on the other side, if they like venture too far out of their own world, then they run into the monsters that are trying to eat them. So they're just like constantly just like trying to just do normal things to get through the day, but also end up getting themselves into trouble, like most Jim Henson things. It was fun.
Yeah.
Fun. I've
never seen Fraggle Rock, but I've heard from people that watched it, they liked it, that it was good.
I haven't seen many episodes, but I think I've only seen like 2 or 3, but it wasn't bad. I liked it. It was good for what it was. Also, the dinosaurs show they are technically Muppets too, because they are created with because Jim Henson's it was a Jim Henson's production.
That's true. The dinosaurs. Studios. I forgot about. Yeah.
Maybe we could do an episode on like just that show, because that program I loved.
Yes.
Dinosaurs was like, well, it was just like picture the honeymooners but like as dinosaurs, and Ralph Cramden ends up having like a family.
And apparently the dinosaurs like finale was one of like the saddest like episodes of TV history, and it's like fucking puppet dinosaurs.
Yes, the meteor shower, they all die.
Yeah. It's like, well, I mean, that literally happened to the dinosaurs, so I guess, it was an apt ending for them, but it's just, it's pretty depressing. Like,
it is, but it's funny. But that show was hilarious. I think there were about 3 seasons on there. I love the show. I've tried to show the missus this. She's just like, I don't get it, and I'm like, that's okay. And of course, they had the baby, which was famous, which was just this like whiny, like annoying thing that was just famous for like hitting the father with hitting Earl with a frying pan, or hitting him with anything he could get his like little like his stumpy little hands on, and just screaming, "I'm the baby, gotta love me."
Mm-hmm.
Like, which that was one of like the big. That was a pretty big catchphrase of its day. We actually had a pull string stuffed animal thing of that, and like at some point that poor thing met a very unfortunate end when I discovered pro wrestling, and that became like let me try all these pro wrestling moves on a doll. So we just jacked up the poor thing like so badly that like anytime you'd pull the pull string, it sounded like a demon.
Oh my god!
It's just like, I'm the baby, love me, give me your.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. But yes, that too was a Jim Henson creation, which I think a lot of people just don't realize how many things have been like Hensoned or Muppet.
Yes.
Like even what's the name of that thrash band? There was like a thrash band a few years ago. I think they were called Thrash or Die. Yeah, they were called
Thrash or Die, and they had like Muppets. They were Muppets.
Yeah, in their music videos, there was like a music video called "Wake Up and Smell the Thrash," and it went viral because they were Muppets. Everyone in the band was a Muppet.
Yep.
And it worked perfectly with like the whole Muppet style. Like it captured the essence of the Muppets just simply by being thrash metal with Muppets. It's a great video if you want to check it out. I still watch that. I actually have never listened to the album, and it's a good song too. But I hope that they're still doing music because they're pretty good. It was a Crazy Man, which was always good for thrash metal.
It's probably not. I mean, the new wave of thrash is kind of like dead.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was. Let's face it. The new
dead on arrival.
No, I wouldn't say dead on arrival.
No, there was some good years.
There were some good years, but like ultimately, it was just a fad being propped up by the record, by like the music industry.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there wasn't enough strength to actually really keep it going the way that it could have.
Yeah, it was too underground to be and we could say whatever you want about like music and like, oh, it's about the art, man, not about the money. Well, if you can't even put food on the table after your tour, then it's not worth doing it.
Yeah. Like it's nice it's nice to be able to do that during your 20s.
Yeah.
Parts of your early 30s, but at some point, like, you kind of got to like pick and choose your spot.
Yeah. Do you want to be able to eat, or do you want to keep doing thrash metal music?
Yeah.
And it sucks, but that's just, the state of our music industry, unfortunately.
Yep. Like, I mean, there is ways to do both, but like you have to be like deceased or somebody like that who like not like, you don't have to be dead, but I mean like the band Deceased, like where like they tour like once or twice a year, and it's only like, but like they have regular jobs.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only way to do it now, is to have a regular ass job that you go back to when you're not touring.
Yeah, and then you just take like you take your vacation time all at once, and then and then you just go back to work for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
State of affairs, but that's how they do it. That's how it's done.
And now moving on to a more even depressing topic.
Yes.
Jim Henson's final years. Sadly, Jim Henson passed away in 1990, and I don't know if we want to do a truth or whacked on this because the circumstances around his death, although it was ruled an infection, I would say could be a little suspicious because he died shortly after his deal with Disney went through, and Frank Oz has gone on the record as saying that the Disney deal is probably what killed Jim. It made him sick. So, I mean, I don't know if we want to do a truth or whacked. Obviously, we could say how there's a conspiracy that Disney had him friggin' bumped off after the deal went through just so they wouldn't have to pay out the money, but they had the friggin' rights to the Muppets.
I don't think there's enough evidence. I wouldn't do a truth or whacked on this. If we were to do it, this is a truth.
Yeah, I would say this is a truth too, because of
it's just a bad coincidence. But I feel like he knew that he was already
he was such a workaholic. He didn't really have time to take care of himself, and that really is what killed him.
Yeah, even his children, like him and Jane, his first wife, he did remarry again, later on with someone else, I believe. He either remarried or he had a longtime girlfriend with for somebody else, but him and his wife just split up because they were still very close friends and everything for the rest of their lives. It was just that he just never had time to he just constantly was working and he didn't even have time to really spend with the children or her, and that kind of caused the strain. But similar to Frank Zappa, he when we talked it was we said this in the Zappa episode a few back, but all of his children began working with the Muppets at early ages because that was the only way that they could be with him. There was that they could spend any real time with him. He was just constantly working. That was the only way that they could really bond with him.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that work ethic is really what led to him dying. Is because what happened was that he got an infection, didn't get it treated, and it basically became systemic and went into his lungs. And by the time he finally did go to the hospital, he was already coughing up blood at that point, and there was just nothing they could do for him. His organs began to shut down. They tried to pump him up full of antibiotics, but they had to put him on a ventilator, and then his organs just shut down because of toxic shock syndrome from basically what started out as a strep throat that just never got treated. And it's really sad because he was such a great artist and cultural icon, and that work ethic that he had is what really led to his downfall, because he didn't take care of himself. And happens to so many people. You could probably say it happened to Frank Zappa, that he was just so busy doing music and touring and writing music that he didn't find the time to see a doctor and take care of himself, and got sick and passed away. And it seems like a lot of artists in all forms of art, whether it's music or painting, a lot of artists unfortunately meet an untimely end, and it's sad. But I think the one good thing is that they live on in their art, and Jim Henson certainly lives on in his art, with the Muppets.
Right. I mean, just just to kind of continue on what you were saying, just a lot of the ones that, a lot of artists who do end up dying either young, or they end up dying in just because they're neglectful of their own health, and they sacrifice their own health for their art.
Yes.
like just a lot of times it's like, the deaths are very odd because it's like really like sometimes you look up somebody and you say, oh well, oh, this person was a genius. Oh man, it's too bad they're dead. Oh, I wonder how they died. And then you look at it and you're like, really? That's what did it?
Yeah.
Like just a lot of, and it just doesn't make any sense. But I mean, it's because, like you said, they were dedicating all of their time to their craft. And
Yes.
like, if it was a little thing, it was just like, all right, well, it's just a cough. I won't bother with it. I got to finish this painting. Or it was like, and then like, 2 months later, the wife is like, or the husband's like, oh, you got that same cough still. Yeah, it's nothing. I'll deal with it later. And then it's getting really, and then one day it gets really bad. And then they're like, well, you see a damn doctor now? And it's like, all right, fine. This is really annoying and I can't paint. So I guess I'll go see a doctor. And the doctor's like, you've got stage 4. Like,
yeah.
What, like, why didn't you come to me sooner?
Yeah.
And like the doctor.
And that's always the story, is that like if they had come sooner, they probably would have lived.
Right. And like the doctor had like one of the like this Lawrence D. Altman, this doctor or medical expert they call him here. He has like said about Jim Henson's death that like he could have I'm sorry, Dr. Gelmont, who treated Henson, he had said that he could have been saved if he just took the antibiotic treatment like a few hours earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like sometimes you gotta just sit still. You just kind of gotta like take a seat back and just like say, all right, I should nip this thing in the bud. I've had a cough for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the greatest artists in history, they literally lived and died for their art.
Yeah.
And you look at people like Jim Henson, you look at someone like Joey Ramone, who died of cancer at a young age, most likely because of the years of playing clubs where people smoked, and he dealt with all this. Like, Joey Ramone was someone who didn't smoke, he didn't do drugs, he didn't really drink, he wasn't like a partying person, but he still died of cancer because of all those years of inhaling secondhand smoke, most likely from doing his craft and doing his art, singing in clubs, and and it's just, you go back through history, all of the artists and all of the musicians that have died because of their art, or put their life into their art and died because of it. It's the list is endless. And it's sad because again, you don't have a great artist dies, and then you don't have that art anymore. You don't have that window into that person's soul anymore because they're passed away. But on the flip side of that, like I said, you have at least the legacy is left. They live on through that, what they left behind.
Right, and sometimes there are people who still live on that were close to them, like Oz, and what was the other fellow's name again? Jerry Jewell, was it?
Yeah, well, and Jim Henson's own children continued to do, the Muppets, and create new stuff. Actually, Brian Henson was the one that directed A Muppet Christmas Carol, which came out a couple of years after Jim had passed away. And, A Muppet Christmas Carol is as good as any Muppet thing that came before it. In my opinion, it's great. It's a great retelling, like I said before, of A Christmas Carol, done with the Muppets, and it worked. And the ghosts, were scary.
Yeah, Jerry Jewell, that's his name.
And, it was great.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, you do have that where the legacy lives on, and they're still able to create like wonderful pieces. Like even Muppet Treasure Island is still a good one, and Muppets in Space is really good when we learn about, or Muppets from Space, where we learn about Gonzo a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
They're still able to tell the story, and it's still really great. I actually really enjoyed the recent Muppet movies that they did with what's his name, Jason Segel. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually really liked those movies too.
I haven't watched them.
The first one is called The Muppets, and then I think the second one that they did was Muppets Most Wanted. Muppets Most Wanted wasn't as it was still decent, but the Muppet Movie, I actually yeah maybe it was just called the Muppet Movie. It was actually really really great. If you haven't seen that, you should definitely check it out because Jason Segel, it's like he was Marshall on How I Met Your Mother, and
Yeah.
he was also the guy in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. He was in I Love You Man. He had a lot of movies in the early to mid 2000s, and he's kind of fallen off the map after How I Met Your Mother ended. But he probably does like a lot more like writing and producing now.
Yeah.
But he's actually a very big Muppets fan, and he was like part of like reviving the Muppets. In more recent years, Disney Muppet stuff hasn't really been that good. I would say the movies that they're producing, or at least I can speak for like the Haunted Mansion thing that they've done like recently. I enjoyed. I haven't seen Letters from Santa yet. I plan to,
Yeah.
but there still are people close to them where they're still able to carry on that legacy, which I
Yeah.
think is important. Surprisingly, Kermit the Frog was not retired when Jim passed, but about 6 months later was when they started bringing Kermit back. The guy who was Kermit initially wasn't really he left he left in October 2016, and then this other guy Matt Vogel is the current Kermit. But it's just crazy. Just how long of a legacy that you can really leave, and even death is not going to stop it. Like it's still now more than 30 years later since Jim has passed, and it's still like just nonstop. Like I would say they might be as popular as they've ever been, but they're not as big as they were. If that makes any sense, like they're more like it's a more recognizable name, but it's not. But they're not. But maybe the recognition is bigger than it's ever been, and the popularity is still never going to touch what it was in like the 70s and 80s. But
Yeah.
and even the 90s, I would say,
Yeah. I mean,
was when they were
again,
like on like the decline, but still at the top of the mountain.
yeah, and it's still, again, they're cultural icons, so you're never gonna lose that, that level for the Muppets, because they're just, they're so culturally ingrained in our society now. But the stuff that is being produced now is not as good, obviously, because Jim is no longer involved, obviously.
Very. I'm not sure how involved Brian is at this point anymore.
I don't know how much of the Henson family are still involved,
Yeah.
since Disney took over.
Right. Frank Oz, as we said before, has like heavily criticized Disney because they won't include him in things and they don't want to work with him,
Yeah.
which I think is a mistake.
Yes.
But what are you going to do? I'm not the person who's like the head of the Muppets for Disney stuff, so I can't do anything about that. But I think Frank should absolutely be like the main. He should be like if one of the Hensons are not running it, he should still be second in command until he dies.
Yeah.
Frank Oz. But Sesame Street has since like gone on to be part of HBO Max. Actually,
Yes.
it's
HBO kind of actually saved Sesame Street, because there was a time there where they weren't sure. PBS was not getting enough funding for it. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to continue. Which, I don't know how real this is, or it's one of those things like like Twinkies going away, and then like everyone, it was a huge backlash. So Twinkies are back, because everyone started buying them again. So I don't know if it was kind of like that kind of manufactured, like, oh shit, we're gonna have to cancel Sesame Street now. We don't have the money for it, and then kind of like everyone's like, oh crap, watch Sesame Street, and HBO kind of swooped in and like, oh, we'll put it on HBO, and and so that'll help save it too.
Yeah, I feel like if Sesame Street wasn't pulling, I feel like if PBS was going to cancel Sesame Street, it wasn't just going to be Sesame Street. They were just going to shut down the whole network.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't know what else would bring people to PBS.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's not the Chopin concerts. No, but not as much as I like Chopin, I don't think that that many people are going to be going in. I don't think like small nations are going to be tuning in for Chopin concerts.
Able to watch the Ken Burns baseball special.
Oh no. Anything but that. But it's just incredible to see how this has just stood the test of time, and there's no signs that it's going to go anywhere soon, anytime soon. Have you watched any of the newer Sesame Streets since you've got a little one at home?
Not really particularly newer ones. He's watched mostly like the older, like not like old ones, but like ones from like the 90s and the early 2000s reruns.
Okay.
I haven't really watched like the newer ones so much.
Mm-hmm. Has he ever seen Elmo in Grouchland?
I don't think so.
That's actually not that bad.
Really?
It's a guilty pleasure for me. I actually like that movie.
That's funny.
But yeah, any closing statements on the Muppets?
I mean, it's what can you say that hasn't already been said? It's they're you anybody and everybody knows the Muppets, and it's crazy that Jim had was able to create such a cultural force out of puppets. It's not something that's I think really what why you ask why does this exist is because how could it possibly be good? It was puppets, but it is amazing. It was amazing. Not as good as it used to be, obviously today, but still a force in our society, and you can't. It's so hard to explain how they were able to capture that and make it into what it was.
And the essence still lives on. I think that's
Yes.
the most important thing is even though the quality is not what it once was for obvious reasons, I think there's still little essences. I think there's still a little bit of the essence of the Muppets, the spirit of what their characters are and the spirit of that humor, because they have their own brand of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's little bits that will always be there, even if certain other things are not. I think those little they may not seem like much, but these are the pillars of what the Muppets framework is, and that's really what helps make it unique.
Yeah.
But just a beautiful human being who brought so much joy to this world.
Yeah.
Jim Henson, and even though he's been gone for a long time, his legacy still lives on. He revolutionized just puppets. He revolutionized the design. He revolutionized what it could be. He brought puppetry and ventriloquism to its full potential. And it's just astounding what has been able to come from the idea that this guy had when he was a senior in high school, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's that's you said it there. It was he really was an amazing man, an amazing artist, and
maybe not the greatest husband, but a wonderful person all around.
Yeah.
But But what artist isn't flawed?
Right.
This has been Why Does This Exist? Thank you, each and every one of you, for once again spending time with us, for just listening to our crazy spiel about things, and just hearing two dudes just talk from their heart about like all these this one weird thing that kind of brings all of us together and makes us think, oh, well, maybe the world's not such a bad place. Sometimes. All right. If you've got a loved one next to you, hold them tight and put on the Muppets. It's holiday season. I don't know if there's a Muppets Hanukkah special or a Muppets Kwanzaa, but I just watch something Muppets related this holiday season. Have a good time and just be good to each other. This has been Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
I'm Rob.
And remember, question everything.
Good night.